The most damning thing that came out of our extraordinary investigation, and I thank all the staff who did unbelievable work on the most in-depth, most serious investigation ever done by this committee, one of the 2 or 3 oldest in Congress, was that FAA and Boeing were compliant. Now, how can you be compliant when 346 innocent people died in crashes because of a system which was developed by engineers? In 13, they decided, well, no one outside Boeing should know about the system. Ultimately, the system was wiped out of the pilot's manual until after the first crash. And beyond that, the system had been significantly modified. And essentially, this was concealed from the public, from the pilots, and from the FAA. That can never, ever happen again. And we have seen to it in the legislation we passed, which we want to see fully and quickly implemented, that any novel, new things on the plane, anything that can take control without pilot command, will be fully disclosed and known and examined to be certain that it's safe. Now, there's been one indictment. This started at the top in Boeing. It started in the executive suites, in the boardroom. We got to rush this plane out the door to compete with Airbus, or we're going to lose sales. Big chart, countdown clock. They put pressure all the way down the line. As Rick said, we have in the Seattle area the best engineers and aircraft mechanic and workers in the world. Unfortunately, Boeing, to save money, decided, gee, let's go down to the south where we don't have to have unions. And they've been having some pretty extraordinary quality problems down there. There weren't quality problems except for rushing the line in Renton. And we heard about those from one of the production managers. The fact is that they also concealed that a Boeing test pilot, fully conversant and knowledgeable of the system, knowing it was going to trigger, could not recover the plane within 12 seconds, meaning you were going to go in. That was concealed. The fact that one person has been indicted, Boeing is slapped with a fine that's insignificant in terms of their revenues. I'm concerned that we haven't seen a major change in the culture there. And that's why we're mandating, can you imagine, a company the size of Boeing didn't have a safety management system in place. That's pretty extraordinary. I know little tiny manufacturers that have such systems in place to make things nowhere near as critical as airplanes. That's one of the things in our bill that must be implemented as soon as possible. I see the timelines drag out 1-2 years. I get pretty tired of this process, particularly when lives are at stake, potentially at stake. And I want to hear today what we're going to do to expedite the most critical parts of the legislation we passed, fully bipartisan, through the House, through the Senate. It's a mandate from Congress that the culture at FAA is going to change. The scrutiny is going to change. We're giving you additional engineers and expertise to help keep up with these companies, but it has to change. And the fact that as Rick also mentioned, we have things that were supposed to be self-executing, pretty damn clear in the law. The flight attendants duty time, I'm glad it burped out of FAA. It seems every time we hold a hearing, I think I'm going to start holding a lot more. Out comes something we've been waiting for. So we finally got the flight attendant duty time only, it was November 4th, 18, self-executing law. Your attorneys over there need a little poke for them to look at explicit things written by Congress that say this goes into law, it's self-executing. You don't screw around with it for 3 years. You don't send it to OMB. You just do it. and it didn't happen. And now we're at we got an NPRM out, proposed rulemaking, and that'll take another, how long? Meanwhile, flight attendants are incredibly stressed with the conditions in the air now. We've gone through that. We've held hearings on that. What's going on the planes. They're overworked. They're tired. And we don't have that rule in place yet. A number of the airlines have already complied. Guess what? It didn't hurt their service. It didn't cost them anything. It just meant that some of the people who manage schedules had to create new computer programs. It shouldn't take 3 years. And secondary barriers, we now know after January 6th that there are probably more domestic terrorists in this country than there are foreign terrorists in this country. And yet I see the flight attendant standing bravely there by the flight deck door. When I flew last week, the pilot or co-pilot, I don't know which he was, he came out and chatted for 20 minutes with the flight attendant standing there like this while she was looking over her shoulder and talking to him. You tell me a couple of people can't rush that flight deck when that door opens? And yet here we are, we're languishing even further behind on secondary barriers. And I hope this isn't back to the good old days of the tombstone mentality at FAA. We'll move on secondary barriers when some domestic terrorists take over a plane and something really horrible happens. So I would just want to hear from today, from the administrator, how we're going to start being less of a turgid bureaucracy and do what you're supposed to do. Serve the public, protect the public. When we got in this investigation and I found out that regulated entities were now called customers, they're not your customers. They are not customers. They are people who you oversee and regulate. I changed that law after a tragic crash way back in the 90s. I took out the promotional authority from the FAA more than 20 years ago. It's crept back in. It's got to get kicked out the door. I'm looking forward to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.